Good evening. The recording of Parshas Savo is taking place before Shabbos, and therefore the availability of the video and the Divrei Torah will come Motzoi Shabbos and Sunday morning, because it won't be available before Shabbos because we're still in Parshas Kiseitze. But I'm leaving to an Einikel's bris in Eretz Yisrael, so rather than do it next week when I'm going to be there and the hours are different, we chose to do it now. Parshas Savo has in it the tochacha, and the Ramban says that tochacha of Vayikra pertain to Klal Yisrael by the Bais Rishon, before and after of what they lived through. This tochacha of Kisavo applies to the Churban Bayis Sheni and the Tekufa afterwards that Klal Yisrael suffered so much. And the beginning of the Sedra, we know that the Baal Shem Tov used to be the Balkoira, and the 98 klolos that come out in Parshas Kisavo and the Tochacha, many in most shuls refrain from taking the Aliyah. In some shuls, they will have the Balkoira himself go up. Others, they end the Kriya before the Tochacha, and the Oila says the Bracha Achroina, and then he just lanes without anyone going up to be Oila. Because when you have Kriya, it's read into the person who is Oila and who wants a Tochacha filled with all sorts of bad news and curses. But the Baal Shem Tov was the Balkoira, and Al Pi Kabbalah, and there are Sfarim that were written, and they're available to show you how each and every pasuk is a bracha in its essence. So in the Baal Shem Tov's shul, the sickest person in the tzibur used to get the aliyah for the toichacha, and as the Baal Shem Tov read the kriya, he was reading it, of course, to the tzibur, but it was to the one who was oila for that aliyah. And since he knew the esoteric, the Kabbalah, the deeper secrets of it, and brought out pure bracha, he was able to heal. And the person, after hearing and having his aliyah, left the bima cured from his sickness. So many of the Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov were myriad, that they saw it every single year in their shul, of how this person who could barely get through the day was able to leave with a new life, with a new jump start in his health and his daily activity. So but before that, before the Tochacha, the Sedra opens into the panoramic scene of people who came up to Yerushalayim and they brought Bikurim. Now, Bikurim was something of an expression of thanks. They came up and they were greeted on their way into Yerushalayim by singing, by dancing, by so much Kabbalah's ponim. And the person who brought the Bikurim, and a number of psukim are devoted to it, describing his vidui meiser, that he expressed himself with a reminiscence to Arami Oived Ovi, and he expressed himself in such a magnificent, magnanimous way before he took the basket and he gave it to the Kohen with the Bikurim. Now, one of the things that he said in his eloquent delivery was that Vayoreu Osanu Hamitzrim Vaye'anunu. Now, the word Vayoreu means bad. Osanu means us. So the literal translation was that the Mitzrayim made us bad. So the Alshach HaKadosh asks and says, why would it open up with a word of Osanu? What it really means to say is Vayoreu Lanu, that the Mitzrayim were so bad to us in what they did. I mean, we went through, I mentioned last week that 30,000 children, the Medrash says at the end of the story, were thrown into the cement or into the water. I mean, they were terrible. So why would the pasuk say Vayoreu Osanu rather than Vayoreu Lanu? And he answers and says, because the pasuk wants to say that when we surround ourselves and encompass ourselves within an atmosphere that is negative, it seeps into us and it drenches our psyche and our neshamas into that realm, because we are so overly affected by atmospheric winds that prevail. So what the pasuk wants to tell us is that we were an innocent people. We were a people that came down 70 nefashos to Mitzrayim. We were given Goshen for all the Kohanim and Leviim for the Shevet, for the Shevet, and for especially the Kohanim, to be able to sit and to learn and to study Torah. And the rest of the people were thrust into a very ugly atmosphere of decadence, immorality, and even so, only one case happened in 210 years of actual that the Yidden did an immoral act. And even that one case of Shloimeh's Bas Divri, who thought it was her husband because it was pitch black, didn't realize a goy had come into the tent. So it wasn't like an open, defiant, Baltaiva type of an act. It was something which happened, but it was something which she wasn't held blamable because she was really an anusa. So they went through 210 years, and the Medrash says not one Yid ever fell into a Devar Erva. I turned off the air conditioner because it was making too much noise, so we're getting the dividend outside. So when they left Mitzrayim and they said, these people are in the Memtes Shari Tumah, what did it mean, Memtes Shari Tumah? If no one did any of Devar Erva, what do you mean Tumah? But it really means Avodah Zarah. And that's why the Sar Shal Yam said, why should I split for them? Halalu of the Avodah Zarah, halalu of the Avodah Zarah, that they were into Avodah Zarah, so why are they worthy? So the schus of Hayom Ra'ah Vayonos, the exemplary exertion of control of a situation by Yosef HaTzadik, that they saw the Vayonos, Vayetze HaChutza, that he ran out and he did not succumb to the temptation and the pressure of crossing the line. Now, and that, says the Al Shulchan HaKadosh, as a message to each and every one of us, you can go in pure and you can move to a community that the community has a lot to learn in building up the morale and the level of Kedusha that surrounds them. But while it's happening and you move because you felt you had a good place to live and it's just 2 blocks from a shul, but meantime, the atmospheric effect is happening and it can drag you down. So even though the Jews were not actively participating in any of this, but being around it, Vayareu Osanu, they lessened us. They were bad to us, not referring just to the beating and the punishing and all of that, but simply alluding to the fact of living in a community that was way down the totem pole of what they should be doing and living their lives in a level of honesty, a level of purity, a level of activity worthy of community, but they sunk because they were around all this bad influence. Now, we know that in the Torah there are places that when a pasuk ends, there is a pay, which tells you that the parsha continues into the next topic, or there can be a samach, which really is a semicolon. It stops. It's like a semi-stop at that point. Now, if you look in our Sedra, before the Tochacha, the pasuk says, Vayitzav Moshe es ha'om Bayom Hahu Lemor, that the people who stand by Har Grizim are going to get, that's where the bracha is going to come, and a number of Shvatim are mentioned who stood on that side near Har Grizim, and Har Evel is where the curse came from. And a number of Shvatim were told to stand next to Har Evel, the Klola and the Bracha. Now, the Levium answered and said in a very loud voice, Orur ha'ish asher yaseh pesel u'masecha to'avas Hashem, Maaseh yedei chorash v'som basoser v'anu kol ha'om v'omru amen. And then there's a samach, which means that is in and of itself a statement to be taken not just as the curse of Avodah Zarah, but it should become the embodiment and seep into the neshamas of each and every yid and concentrate on it in and of itself. Then the next pasuk says, Orur makla ove v'imo v'omar kol ha'om amen, and a samach, because kibbud aveim is a world of its own, and a person has to concentrate on it, and he has to focus on it, and he can't fool himself by bringing a tea twice a day to his mother or to his father and thinking that that is sufficient. in terms of kibud av ve'em. And then there's a samach. And then it talks about masig gevul re'eu, that if somebody has a store and that is their parnasa, and somebody else says, well, I see the man's doing very well. Obviously, those items are popular. And 3 stores down, he opens another store with the same. That's hasagas gevul. It's a shaila. Let them go ask a rav. Let them ask, are you allowed to do this? But there's a samach at the end, because that is a world of its own. And then it says, Oror mashke iver badorech, that somebody purposely misleads a blind person. Well, I know that he's going to need a new horse because his horse is failing, so let me send him to my friend, even though his prices are higher, but I'm going to send him down that road. So you are misleading and misguiding the blind one. And after that statement, again, a samach. Because that in and of itself, misleading people, you have a store, you have a commodity you're selling, are you misleading the people? Then the pasuk says, Orur mate mishpat ger yosom v'almana v'omar kol ha'am amen, and there's no samach. And the next pasuk begins talking for a number of psukim about improper intimacies. Or shochev im achoso, basoviv, or shochev im chosanto, different types of immoral acts. And each of them also have a samach, because each one you can learn out relationships and how things lead one thing into another. And you can appreciate that when the Torah says that you shouldn't really drink wine with a goy in a restaurant, if you take out a business associate and he's not Jewish, that it can bring you to start mixing with the goyim. And when people would say, oh, it's so fanatical and it's so, people go out and they don't mix with the goyim, but there have been many who have fallen in. And how wise the Torah is in its guidance and in its limitations. But coming back to our pasuk that did not have a samach, that mate mishpat ger yosem v'almana, that a person who wants to misjudge and you want to incorrectly execute judgment that a ger has to do this or that, or you paskin a halacha for the yosem or the almana, the only statement that's repeated 15 times in the Torah is yosem and almana, how we treat them. How do we treat a yosem and how do we treat an almana? And there is a discussion in the Gemara whether or not a person could change their mazel or not. And there's a mandi omer that, openly the Gemara says that is there mazel? Yesh mazel Yisrael or ein mazel? Is there no such thing as mazel? But Rashi right away says it's not a question if there's mazel. We say mazel tov and we wish good mazel, and it comes down from constellations and astrology and other considerations that the person, how he was born, when he was born, where he was born, that affects. But the yosem and the almana, says the Gemara, that even the mandi omer that holds that you can never change your mazel, what you're born with, that's what you stay with your whole life. The other Mandi Yomer that says Yesh Mazli, so that they have the power to change their mazel through davening, through lots of tzedakah. Person sees that he's not succeeding in his business, in his life, and so he has to take some action. Person has fever, 104 fever. You don't just sit there. You take aspirin, you take Tylenol, you take something to relieve the sickness. If a person sees in his life it's not going, he has to stop for a moment. Why isn't it going? And from that cue, he can then move on. So the Gemara, the point I want to bring out is that the Gemara says that even the Mandi Yomer, you can never in your life change your mazel, says there is one case that you could change your mazel, and that is by helping a Yasam and an Almana with tremendous help and tzedakah. And even the Mandi Yomer that holds you could never change, oh yeah, for that you could change. So a Yasam and an Almana are in a category of their own. And the reason that there is no samach after that one pasuk out of 11 psukim, everyone has a samach at the end except for the last, the final pasuk. It has a pay because it goes into the tochacha then. But the reason that there is no samach for the Yasam and Almana is because right after that, it's connected. And that is the arroyos. And that how does a person fall in? Like the Gemara says, that kulam klal Yisrael ba'avak lashon hara. Talking lashon hara, almost everyone falls in. And Ruban Ganvi, and the majority are Ganovim. Now that doesn't mean that they go and put their hand into someone else's pocket, but they do it in different ways. They cheat them in business, they cheat them in what they say, they cheat them 10 different ways. And miyutan, very few, only the minority of the minority fall into arroyos. They fall in, but it's not the rove of Klal Yisrael, and it's not kulam. It's just a... And how does it happen? When they mistreat the Yasam and the Almana. That opens the gateway to falling all the way down the ladder. And that's the reason there is no samach after that pasuk. Because it doesn't end there. Because the next pasuk is talking about arroyos, immorality. Because it's connected. That you want to know, if you want to guard and put up a permanent station of iron, that you will never cross that, do good things for Yisraelim and Almanos in helping them in one way or another. Now, the Al-Shech HaKadosh says on the Medrash that there are 3 types, 3 reasons the world was created. And it's based on the word that's written, Rashis. Berashis, the first word of the Torah, Bishvil Yisrael, Shenikra Rashis. And then, Vayar Rashis Lo, Bishvil the Torah. There the word Rashis is a reference to Torah. And then the Medrash says the third place is our Parsha, Ki Savo, that says, V'lokachta me Rashis Periho Adoma. And the Bikurim are referred to as Rashis. Now, if I was to go around 200 people and ask them, Do you agree that the Torah is a staple, the cementing factor of Klal Yisrael? You would say yes. And that's why the Rashis in one place refers to the Torah. Would you agree that Klal Yisrael, Yidden, are also a cementing factor in the world? You'd say absolutely. The whole world was created for the Yidden and for the Torah. But very few of you would say Bikurim. You may guess Shabbos, something else. Bikurim is a choshev mitzvah, but you wouldn't say that that's on par with Torah and Klal Yisrael. And yet the Medrash says that the third Rashis, that the world was created because of Bikurim. Says the Alshich HaKadosh, and there were only 6 people who got the title of Kadosh: the Or Chaim HaKadosh, the Rashi HaKadosh, and I'll come up with the others in just a moment. The Arizal is called Zal, not Ari HaKadosh, even though he's referred to sometimes like that. But I'm talking, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the only Tana or Amora who had the title Kadosh. So the Alshich HaKadosh says, and the Shloh HaKadosh, the Shloh also had the title, and that's why you see he's buried in Tveria in a cemetery with 10 other Tanoim, with Tanoim and Amoroyim. He's the only one from his generation, and you have to go back 1,800 years to the others who are buried with him, that he had a special neshama, and he was zoichet to be buried in that cemetery in Tveria, together with Rabbi Yossi, with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, with Rabbi Elazar Breb Hyrcanus, Ravami Ravasi, the biggest of the big. And he had the title Kadosh. So the Alshich HaKadosh says that the halacha is that when people came with Bikurim to the Bais HaMikdash, the rich came with golden or silver vessels, and in it they put the Bikurim. And when they got to the Bais HaMikdash, they went over to the Kohen and they handed him the Bikurim in the vessel, and they took out the Bikurim and gave him back his vessel. But the poor people who came with a shabby basket that they took from the leftovers in the field and put together a basket, when it was given to the Kohen with the Bikurim inside, the Gemara says that the Kohen took the basket of Bikurim from them and kept it and did not give back the basket. And the Gemara even says on that, Basar an Yanusa, that the poor get poorer and the rich get richer, because here the guy got back his vessel, and here the poor guy didn't get it back. The Kohen took it and kept the whole thing. So the Alshich HaKadosh explained that when Bikurim was brought, there was a standing ovation around the presentation of the Bikurim to the Kohen, and everybody was watching. So when the rich man took his gold vessel, which was magnificent, and handed it to the Kohen took out the Bikurim and gave it back, and everyone saw his vessel, he was very proud of it. Look at the gorgeous, the mastery of putting together the golden vessel, and look how beautiful it is. But the poor guy, when he took out his bikurim, everyone saw how shabby. So says the Al-Shech HaKadosh, the Torah protected the oni, that when the Kohen took the basket with the fruit, he didn't take it out for anyone to see how shabby the basket was. And that's why he kept the shabby basket, which wasn't worth much anyway, from how it's described that the poor put together their vehicle of bringing the bikurim to the Kohen. And that, says the Al-Shech HaKadosh, is why the world reishes the Torah, reishes Klal Yisrael, but to be sensitive to a Yid's feelings and to make sure he is never humiliated publicly, that's an equal reishis to Klal Yisrael and to the Torah. And that has to sharpen and polish the way we deal with people, and that we have to be able to make sure that humiliation in front of crowds, in front of people, don't take place. Like there was once a joke told, and there was a picture to the joke, and it showed 20 people in the room laughing hysterically, a face of each person laughing and bending over, and a couple came in to join the gathering. And when they opened the door and the couple walked in and said, "Oh, we were just talking about you," as if to say that they were hysterically laughing because they were talking about, which is like the ultimate in embarrassing somebody. They meant it as a joke, but I don't envy the people who did that because of the level of embarrassment and how they were put down. So that, says the Al-Shech HaKadosh, is the key to our success in our Bein Adam Lachaveiro. Now in the Tochacha, it says that if someone is high, lemala, if he does the Torah and mitzvahs, v'lo sihiya lemata. Now, if it says in the pasuk that you're going to be lemala, up, riding high, why does the pasuk then have to say v'lo sihiya lemata, and you won't be down? If you're high, you're obviously not down. But the answer is that people, and I'm going to give you two examples from two separate psukim, that people can have a situation that they're given a tremendous bracha, and they do not handle the bracha properly, and they couldn't handle it. They weren't equipped, they didn't know how to handle it, and they tripped all over themselves. It pains me whenever I see that somebody won the lottery, they had $100 million, and they were leading a regular life without money, but like most people, they went to work every day, they paid their bills, and they had a regular communal and family life. And then he got the 100 million, and he was absolutely destroyed. He couldn't go out and buy one new car. He bought 6 cars. At the end of the year, he didn't have any money left, and he became a balchoiv, and he really destroyed himself and his life, because the blessing of success was not handled properly. Because instead of making the money, and the first thing, taking off 20% and giving it to mamish aniyim, going into 50 groceries and paying the bill for so many people who couldn't pay the bill and were hesitant to go in for a loaf of bread and a bottle of milk for their family because the bill was so high, and wipe out all of their bills so that they could regain their dignity and go into the grocery with their heads high. He could have done so much good, and that's the first thing to do. But he didn't. He had to overindulge. They were pouring champagne all over his head. Is that a hanhaga? Is that the way to react to bracha? And the second example, that the pasuk says, "Uvohu alecha kol habrachos ha'ele v'hisigucha," and they will reach you. Now, that's a pasuk from the Torah, from this week's Sedra. Now, why in the world, if uvohu alecha kol habrachos ha'ele, a person is drenched with bracha, and he is showered with so much goodness, why does the pasuk have to say v'hisigucha, and it will reach you? If bracha is showered on you, obviously it reaches you. But the answer is that each and every day, people think money is a solution for everything. Oh, if I just had the $5 million, no problems. That would take care of everything. Why doesn't a person, like many do, when they open their eyes and say Moda Ani, how many people don't open their eyes in the morning? And then they wash Negel Wasser, they say Moda Ani, they get out of the bed, and they're able to walk. There's some people wake up, they don't know what happened. Their back is killing them. They couldn't stand up. The sciatica is so painful that they had to crawl out of bed. So the regular life that we have in its daily functioning mode is the biggest bracha. That a person can get up and take a shower and begin the day, run to shul, answer to the brachas, give out tzedakah. There's so much filled with good. But v'hisigucha, it should be able to permeate your mind and your reason to fully appreciate what's happening. Because life is filled with so much good. And if a person would add up all of the good and sit down and write, this Baruch Hashem today, this Baruch Hashem today, so they would write down also the two major problems they have, and many people, unfortunately, instead of dwelling on the 40 good things, they dwell on the two bad things. They walk down the street thinking about this negative thing. I'll never talk to that person again after they... Instead of pushing aside and transforming what you think as being so bad, focus and dwell on so much good. That's the pshat v'hisigucha. We can be filled with brachas in the sea of bracha, and we don't get wet from the bracha. It doesn't enter our minds, our hearts, our seichel, our activities, our speech, because we're busy in the realm of negativity, and that's what we are living our lives with each and every day. So at the tail end, at the end of the Tochacha, the pasuk says, "Tachas asher avadata es Hashem Elokecha besimcha umeirov kol." The Arizal says that we know the rule that schar mitzvah b'hai alma leka, that a mitzvah has such an eternal effect that if you gave all the diamond mines and all the emerald mines in the world to the person for that mitzvah, it couldn't pay him for his mitzvah, because that's temporary and the mitzvah is eternal. So you're talking about forever and forever and forever. So there's no reward in this world for a mitzvah. But says the Arizal that for simcha shel mitzvah, that you do and can get the reward in this world. The simcha shel mitzvah. And there are people who are so happy to do a mitzvah. You see, before they're putting on their tefillin, their faces light up. And it's not just the 1,000th time, so they're busy still thinking about their stock market or their business or what, but they're concentrating on the schus of putting the tefillin on. You could see that the overflow of the simcha in being granted the opportunity and doing the mitzvah, that it overflows with the simcha of doing it. And that, the Arizal says, is why after all of the tochacha, that pasuk about simcha comes, because the Baal Shem Tov used to say that if a person with atzvus, with melancholy, with sadness, with dejection, with disappointment, lives his life, he can never achieve a level of ruchnius, because the propellers to bring all the mitzvahs and everything else is ava and yira, but it's with a base and a backbone of simcha. Now, the last thing that's mentioned in the tochacha, and if you go down the psukim, it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. First, this will happen to a person if you don't keep the Torah and do the mitzvahs. Then, and if you don't, then it goes to that. And then if you still don't, it go, and all the psukim are in a descending order of pain and tsar and punishment. And the last statement of the tochacha is that V'heshivcha Hashem Elokecha Mitzrayim Bo'anios, that you're going to be brought back to Mitzrayim, and you're going to be captives, and you're going to be sold as avodim. Ve'ein koine, and no one's going to want you even as an eved. On the ships that the pasuk is saying that's taking you back to Mitzrayim, that on the ship you're hoping you'll be sold to a decent household and you'll become an eved there. You'll have 3 daily meals and you'll have some life. But the pasuk says ve'ein koine, no one's going to want you as they think. So you're going to come back to Mitzrayim and you're going to be drifting through the streets with no purpose. And the Meforshim ask, if the whole tochacha was in a condescending level, each pasuk to pasuk, this is the end? I mean, it's bad to go back to Mitzrayim, and it's bad if you want to be sold to have work and not have the work. But is it as bad as mothers eating their children, as one of the psukim says? So why is this listed last? The Meforshim ask. And they answer and say that there is nothing worse for a human being than feeling that he lived a lie or something that was not proper his entire life. And that's why with many Balei Tshuva, when a Baal Tshuva asks me and says, how could I ever Do you know how many ham sandwiches I ate for 40 years? I mean, how could I ever be mitayr? Now, when somebody would say that to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he would say, and through his bracha, because, and we're not at his level, but his bracha could cause this metamorphosis to wipe out the effects of all those averis and all the treif and everything else. That was his bracha. He says, your beginning begins now, and everything till now as a true Baal Tshuva is wiped off the slate. And that fortified the person, that bracha, to be able to achieve going from level to level as a Baal Tshuva, and then subsequently all of the averis became mitzvahs, because you do tshuva mitoch ahava, it becomes a true mitzvah. So this Baal Tshuva ended up with bushel baskets of averis, who now were transformed into actual beautiful mitzvahs. And that is the reason that it's listed last, because that can be the most painful thing for a person that had to go back to his beginnings and relive what he thought he gave up. And that's why the person returning to Mitzrayim in those ships, and he couldn't even be sold as before as a slave as he was once upon a time, was the most painful thing. And we should be able to, in a positive way, as I tell the Baal Tshuva, you are b'makom shabalei tshuva oimdim ein tzadikim gemurim yecholim lamod. That because the tzaddik does only mitzvahs, he never did the averis. But you who are now doing the mitzvahs, and you have all of these bushel baskets of averis, they're turning into mitzvahs also. So you have a double portion, a double layer that above and beyond the tzaddikim gemurim. So you are able to soar heavenward and achieve above and beyond anyone else here in Olam Hazeh. We should continue in our Chodesh Elul, striving, thriving, becoming better. And it doesn't mean trying on 50 fronts. We can pick one thing, but sincerely attack it and stand by it with consistency and constancy. Good night.